In Lakesh and Veritas, everyone, sending you the frequencies of oneness and truth. You're now tuning into Of the Sun's Suncast, our weekly podcast, bringing you all elevated topics on expanding ourselves and humanity into becoming truth and moving into oneness. Coming live all the way from One Mind, I am Tavares of the Sun, Quantum Light Property Clearing Instructor. And we have today LaOta of the Sun, the architect of the Sun, and Jessica of the Sun, an ally and advocate for Of the Sun. So, ladies, in Lakesh and Veritas.
In Lakesh and Veritas, Tavares and Jessica.
In Lakesh and Veritas, both of you as well.
We want to explain to everyone that in Lakesh is identifying and acknowledging the oneness in each of us, and Veritas is the Latin word for truth, and we stand in truth, we call for truth, and we hope to share with you some truth today.
That we will. And so, collectively, humanity is having an experience, quite the experience at that. And one of the things that we've noticed is that there are many events that are taking place across the world, globally, that are not quite getting the exposure that they require. We're also seeing that there's a lot of disinformation, conflicting information regarding things such as COVID and the pandemics that we are experiencing on the planet. So we're here to shine the light of truth on these things today. And we have a few different articles that we have come across and that has been shared with us that touch on these incongruencies or other ideas or experiences that are taking place globally that require the light of truth on them. So I'd like to kick things off with the article that I found. Now, this was actually on social media, and that's actually one of the interesting things that we've been noticing is that the mainstream media is silencing or silent on many of the things that are occurring. And one of them being what is taking place in Australia, Melbourne to be exact. And as I was scrolling through my social media feed, I saw a link saying that there were public housing apartments with about 3,000 residents that were on lockdown. They were literally detained in their home for about a period of 5 days. And there were armed officers around the building at every floor, and they were doing door-to-door tests for COVID. So I think that was rather interesting that we're not seeing this type of information of what's taking place. And many people in the US, we understand that that is something that our government is looking to usher in, but hasn't quite moved on it. But we can see that other people are doing it in other countries. So LaOta, Jessica, you all have any thoughts on this at all?
I'd like to kick off a conversation about this with this idea of one, I'd like to say that conspiracy is not just a theory.
Especially if you can see facts.
If you
we got the receipts.
Right. That it's not just a theory. That this idea of COVID testing may be many things, and but once you have the DNA swabs of all of the population, there is power in that. Whether it's because you'd like to know how many people are currently affected, but mandatory testing at this level with people on lockdown, where they lose their right to move out or not be tested, is important to note that this kind of imprisonment and enslavement to government or otherwise is unacceptable, and that to demand, and even by law, people are able to give their DNA freely. So this is the laws are different in different countries, but the mandatory taking of DNA for testing or otherwise, it should be noted. That's what I have to share about that. Jessica, you have anything?
From a journalism perspective, I'm honestly of no surprise that there is such an information desert is what one of the terms that's been surfacing about that is news desert. And that means that some areas or even populations are not really getting any coverage except the 2 or 3 main news stations that are obviously very slanted in their reporting. So we have entered a time in media where of the sun can be of most useful to anybody trying to discern what they're being told by the presses these days. It's gotten to the point where, you know, all of these outlets have an agenda, and it's become very much in favor of those specific agendas. And I think many of you listening are no stranger to this concept, right? But it's just been getting progressively worse. And I am based in Germany right now, and we see a good mix of international coverage. LaOta was just telling me that she has not really been seeing what's been going on in the rest of the world through the US coverage. But I can tell you in the German news, they are covering global events. And in fact, I also watch the Japanese news, a Japanese station as well. And it's an English speaking station, and they cover global events too. So it's kind of interesting that my news sources these days are not American, they're all foreign, because they're giving me better reports that are less biased about what's going on in my country. So just keep all that in mind.
I would like to affirm that this is not a new thing. When I lived in Belgium many years ago and was in Europe in general for several years, there were many stories that were taking place there where in Europe they were dumping food from the ships, the American ships. They were refusing to stock the shelves with the genetically modified food. It was during the time of mad cow disease, and none of those stories, as I understood it, ever got to the States. But all of the companies like Nestle and all of the big companies did have to change their formulas. So what they sell in the American market is now different and has been for decades from what they sell in other markets. But the people who lived in the States didn't get it, that news. It was in the International Herald Tribune at the time. But so this is a consistent and long-standing political experience of the media outlets. And this is really not a discussion about that, but more of these stories that are coming out. The story in Melbourne really spoke to the poor people. They didn't say they went to all the mansions and made them stay in and get tested. Although the disease, you know, the pandemic doesn't differentiate between the income levels. So this was truly an assault against those who have the least amount to fight them off with. Another opportunity for those in power to take advantage of those who are not in this country or in another country where this is the modus operandi. So I think it's important to note that the protection that those who need protection most, those who cannot fight for themselves, are still being aggressed on every level. So we've had other news stories as well. Tavares and Jessica have both found other ones. Would you bring them forward?
Yes, I had one of our dear friends who's also of the Sun had sent me a news article yesterday that was on the I think it was the front page of the Miami Herald, if I can be exact. And the interesting thing was the incongruency, and we talk a lot about this, especially in quantum light property clearing. There's practically a whole book chapter devoted to living in a congruent manner, meaning what you're thinking, what you're saying, what you're doing is all congruent, because when it's incongruent, it leads to pain or migraines, as I experienced last week. Let me just put that little footnote in there. Yeah, the incongruency does lead to illness or pain, and that is very, very important. And I think incongruency is where people struggle in life. So the news on the front page of the Miami Herald was actually incongruent. On the right side, it said Florida schools ordered to reopen in August. And then the main story said Miami-Dade restaurants and gyms are closing to fight the COVID surge. So on one hand, we have news about a reopening of schools, which is a major topic for parents of young children. And then on the other hand, we have restaurant, everyone's social life is being affected by this surge in COVID. So one could arguably say from an energetic standpoint, and I'll let, of course, LaOta can elaborate on this far better than I can, that I, from where I'm sitting, it seems to me that this incongruency is contributing to this surge in some way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The diametrically opposed views of two opposites can only be a tearing apart of something. And in the tearing apart, there's always pain and suffering. So if you're a person and you want to leave a situation, but you are concerned about staying, those are two diametrically opposed views. So if the state is doing one thing and the cities are doing another, and they share the landmass and they share the public, then that's a situation of confusion. And it also speaks to the condition of the country, which indicates that populace is calling for an experience that would represent those two diametrically opposed ideas, or so to say, a war. In the same way that inside the body, if you have one thought, if you have the thought that I want to go and the thought I want to stay, that is in essence a war that you're having within yourself. And so this speaks to what we can expect to see in our country, that these incongruencies, these diametrically opposed ideas cannot exist in the same space and serve the populace, or serve the body, or serve the consciousness, or serve the general body of all of those who are there, including the landmass and the other aspects that are not human. They're living in this environment of incongruency. And that can only deteriorate. It can only pull apart. There is no harmony or unity in this. And there is no plan, and there is no way to execute it when the government is not in accord with the states, and the states are not in accord with the cities, and this the system of being on opposite teams or opposite sides, or on different political agendas, instead of being for the people, for health, for growth, for evolution. Instead, they're different sides. This is especially prevalent here in our country as the modus operandi at the moment. This is how we're operating. And it is a finite idea. It cannot take us to infinity. This is quite finite. And Tavares, do you have anything on this?
Yes. As you all were speaking, I pulled up an article of another incongruency that I saw. And this is regarding the World Health Organization and the CDC. And they're disagreeing on mask use in public. And I don't know if you all have been hearing this, but I saw this live once, the head of CDC on live television saying, "Do not wear masks."
I saw that as well.
Yeah.
I saw that as well.
Now it's forced upon us as well. The whole point that I'm making is that these large organizations that, again, that should be ideally for the people, they can't even agree. So what was also coming to mind as you continue to elaborate on this idea is the people who are receiving information from these multiple sources. And it makes me think of just how confused the general populace is regarding what to do in terms of making their choices for survival. And this is something that Jessica touched on in terms of calibrating truth, which I'm seeing in this time. It's so imperative that all people learn how to discern truth from falsehood for themselves, so that when we see some type of incongruency, we can calibrate and calculate the percentage of truth within these ideas. That way we're not walking away confused and dazed and uh, walking down the path of darkness, so to say.
Yeah, so trapped and tricked into more fear. So I'd like to take this opportunity to share with those who are listening what we recommend. We recommend that if you are frail or have pre-existing conditions, you should wear protection when you go out. The COVID is held up by the waveforms. There's many things in our atmosphere, in the ecology that we live in, the environment that we live in, that are in the air, and the air is so condensed with them that it holds the patterns of disease in the air itself if someone walks through it for limited amounts of time. So if you are frail, or if you are senior, or if you have pre-existing conditions, it would be wise, because your immune system is already compromised. If you don't, it would be wise for other reasons. It is not so much that someone's talking will infect you, but if you are afraid and you have a lot of fear and anxiety, and you are in a group of other people, or you sit in the chair of someone who was hysterical and fearful, and you stay in that chair for a length of time, it is likely that everything in our universe is frequency. It is likely that the frequency will find a home with you, whatever age and condition your immune system is in. However, we would encourage you to boost your immune system with simple things. Eat raw garlic, eat 3 bulbs of raw garlic a day. Use ionic silver. We have it on our website. Make sure that you get cultured vegetables inside of you, fermented food that has protected humanity for millennia, has protected people in all levels of disease and all different historical events. We have foods that have chlorella, seaweed added to it, like our Sun and Sea coffee, which is the most nutritious food, according to the World Health Organization, for the last 4 or 5 decades on the planet. Boost your immune system so that whatever aspect, if you find yourself going through an airport, or if you find yourself on a plane, that you can be at peace and you don't have to be frazzled or in the disposition of fear and doubt about what's going on or what you should do. Your immune system, your body itself, is the most valuable thing you have. For a moment, forget politics and talk to your body. Make sure that your body is working at optimal, and then moves through your life doing what you need to do purposely without fear, knowing that your immune system will protect you. So the mask holds a psychological aspect. When people who are frail or people who are afraid see a person without a mask, it raises the fear level. So that should be considered. At this point, we're no longer at the beginning of this. Now everyone is aware and many people are afraid. So wearing a mask serves many purposes, and it satisfies many things. It would be to purposely not wear a mask in the environment where people are so fearful. You may be the person who encourages fear. So there is that. In terms of the science, what's out here is not just what they have determined about COVID. There are other biological weaponized items that are out here. There is more in the waveform in the outer atmosphere than we have been told, or that has even been identified. And some people are seeing it as a yellow film, that there's a yellow film on certain people, and this is yet another level of biologic that is attacking, and whose directive is to seek out and destroy. And its character is different, and it's attacking a different age group from 20 to 50 or 40. It's really in a different mode. So it has a different characteristic, a different personality, and it is overlaying the already established pandemic, along with the fact that the Sahara sands at this time are hovering for many days and descending on cities during this rainy season. They're stopping the rain, which cleans the air, and makes everything so that we can breathe again. The rain is a clearing element of nature. So the Sahara sands, which represent the earth, are hovering in their pattern that they visit the United States every year, but they have come in much more massive densities and layers, and it has been, so to say, waiting to descend until this week. So the Caribbean and Florida and several other states will be experiencing, instead of the rain that normally comes in rainy season, sand will be descending on the population who already can't breathe. And so there is that going on as well. The idea would be to make sure your immune system is as strong as possible. Make sure you're eating food and giving it in Lakesh to release its suffering, asking it to give you the strength that it has for you and the nourishment. These are spiritual things, but they are quite real, and you lose nothing by doing it. You lose nothing by asking your food to release its suffering so that you don't ingest it. You lose nothing by wearing a mask so that someone else doesn't become hysterical on the bus or the plane or the train you're riding on. You lose nothing by making sure that your actions don't create a more negatively intense environment than the one that we have already brought to ourselves through our actions as a global community. So I hope that's helpful.
I can add to that, because I was traveling I was on 3 different continents during as COVID released, and I remember I was in New York City right before that wave hit, so it was already affecting people in New York City. And I can say that I practiced all of that. I did the garlic, the ginger, the kombucha, the cultured veggies, the ionic silver was a big component of that. And I was okay. I did not get sick. I was doing great. When I got back to Germany, I was feeling myself. So
you did walk through airports where people were hysterical, didn't you?
Oh, I did, and I observed it. I observed the hysteria and the unpredictability and the uncertainty of what was to come. And I mean, I could see that as a perceptive person. I could see how bad it was going to get, but I knew that protecting my immune system was the top priority, because the other external factors are what they are, but you can always control how you protect yourself.
We would heartily encourage everyone to, in the morning practice, in your meditation, in your prayer, whatever it is that you do for your spiritual guidance, we encourage you to call for help. Call that health, the frequency of health, come to you, become part of you, be in community with that, be aligned with your own health. Call for it in the same way that we encourage you to call for truth, so that no matter where the news stories are taking place, no matter where the actions are happening, that you become aware of it. That when you listen, that you can hear the truth even in the lie. That you can see the truth even when someone's trying to veil it. And that you then operate as truth in a world of lies. It is true that those who call for truth in a world of lies are really calling for war. So that is what we're calling, that there's going to be something. If we call for truth and our world is made of lies, we're really calling to deconstruct that. And I would encourage everyone to do that, because there is nothing but devastation and extinction on the other side of that. The better of the options is to fight to hear the truth.
I'd like to touch on or highlight this perspective that's really unique here, and that's being presented by the Sun. Just kind of going back a little bit, when you were speaking on the idea of mask and how people can potentially catch COVID, and you were speaking from this higher perspective of it's not just physical, it's not just on contact or breathing in, it's the thoughts you think. So it's it's more of a multidimensional perspective. It's what you eat, it's the emotions, the thoughts, the fear, what's in your energy field already that could be calling forth that type of experience. So this is something that, well, of course, mainstream media wouldn't be covering that idea. However, things as simple as boosting your immunity, which this is common knowledge. This is something that, oh, okay, 101 with health. And but at the same time, layering these understandings, like get your health in order, get your thoughts and your mind in order. And I really love the refreshing perspective that you shared regarding when people don't wear a mask and what we could potentially be creating in terms of fear in others. And it's something that was palpable. I experienced this around the early stages of experiencing COVID. And I could fear when I would not have a mask because I understand, hey, I'm thinking right, I'm eating right, I'll be all right. And as I moved through time and space and I could feel other people's consciousness connect with mine, I could feel the judgment, I could feel the fear, I could see the thoughts. Oh my gosh, he's not wearing a mask. Oh, he's trying to kill us. These type of, these are literal things that people are thinking because as you mentioned, it's also psychological, with the whole mask thing. So I think that's very refreshing, and it does take someone who is of an evolved consciousness to consider these things. All things are to be considered, just as we mentioned again with every aspect of our being. Consider making sure the health is in order. So I really resonated with that. And I mean, you said a lot of things. There's with this other idea that's floating out there of some chemical warfare. I know you mentioned that there was an article that spoke to this idea of Russian planes being stopped multiple times flying over U.S. airspace, specifically Alaska, and that was something that we've seen the articles on this, and that we're also seeing that there's something else out in there that looks like a yellow film, which you mentioned, and I've actually seen that on my way to Whole Foods. I saw it around a younger guy, and he looked like he was in his mid to late 30s, and I could spiritually see this around him. So again, I think this is interesting that again there are many factors that we are up against in terms of keeping our health up. And again, it shows the importance of a lot of what we've mentioned in terms of solutions to make sure that we can keep ourselves above these frequencies, these lower frequencies that are a form of warfare, spiritually, physically, and mentally.
Absolutely. The predatory forces that want to destroy humanity or the United States, are working now not only with the 5G, not only with electromagnetics, not only with the pandemic experience that's being exasperated, but it is not a theory. Conspiracy is not a theory. There are actual forces that are directing negative to us, and as our position, if we are in accord with the position of our country to be predatory and to be abusive, that means that's what we're calling for. It's like who you are is what you're calling for that experience. In the same way that if we encourage people to be fearful, then it is fear that they are going to expect to see. So if in this moment you're scared and shaking in your boots, tomorrow you'll have a material reality that supports that experience that you have called for. Now that's a very sobering thought, but it's the truth. And all of us who had experiences in our lives where we realized the thing we were most afraid of. This is no different. This is the law of the universe. You get what you call for.
Exactly.
Now you have what you call for.
So
Yes.
it is not the way we look at it, but whatever it is that you are wanting to happen to others, whatever it is that you are most emotionally tied to, you tie yourself to it emotionally. Whatever, if you're, if you just love someone and they can't do anything and you have to make them do what you want them to do, then you're tied to enslavement. So you can expect to see that enslavement. If you're, whatever the situation is, what you are is the thing that's the beacon calling to you more of the experience. So being at peace and being healthy, calling that experience, standing in truth, will bring to you more truth. Even in the, since we've been encouraging everyone to call for truth, everyone I've talked to has had a very truthful experience come forward. That something that they had been blind to, but always existed. So this idea of, we encourage you to call for truth, to move forward, ask that you see the truth in yourself and then in your outer world, which is absolutely a reflection of yourself. What we are experiencing is what the collective consciousness, the incongruencies in the collective consciousness. And it is quite clear if you take a moment to think about it. And it is mostly driven by greed. So we can follow the money and find the end to all of these things. Where were these deals made? What happened? Who is it that's the enemy? Who is aggressing us? Who are we aggressing? And is it wrapped up in a package of who paid who what to do something? Why are people being appeased in certain countries and still, being aggressive to us? So there's all of that.
It's interesting to see how a lot of the dramas that are playing out in the everyday person's experience, as you mentioned, appeasement, fear, and things along those lines. It's playing out at every level of the human experience, in the systems and the higher ranks of politics and global relations. So it's just really fascinating, and as you mentioned, a sobering thought to understand that what's outside of us is really in us, and standing upon the law and the truth that we can have what we desire, we can have what we call for, which is the opposite, calling for that truth, calling for that peace, but also recognizing there's some things that we'll have to deconstruct in the process, and understanding that's the fries that comes with the burger, so to say.
I think one of the most important things to take away from this conversation we're having today is that no matter what happens, this is not the end. This is really just getting up to speed. What's happening in our world. There will be many, many, many other layers of events, weather events, all kinds of other events will be coming forward, and quite soon. That we have to make sure that we don't give up, that we know that we have the power. We brought this forward. We have the power to deconstruct it. We just because this is happening does not mean that you have to have the experience of it. So if we can get on board with disciplining ourselves to fight for our own existence, that means first directing your energy towards yourself and your own fears and inconsistent patterns, and you will not have to have the painful experience that is being brought forward. You don't have to live that way. I don't. It's not necessary to. But you can make sure that you work to be one of the ones who looks at the formulas that make life life, and then love that. Love life. Want health. Ask for truth. Do the things that will erect courage, give you fortitude, make you correct, bring wholesomeness forward, that we care about our lineage and others, and that we should not give up because we have so much more to build. We are in the moment of deconstruction of an old way that is filthy and stinky and needs to be deconstructed. It has already started. This is what everyone was born for. This is why you're here. You're here either on one side of it or another. So the idea would be, don't give up. Be your best in this moment. Think of what it would be to uphold life, your life first, and then all other life. Think what it would be like to live in a world of men of honor, where it would be good to be able to know that the person you take your children to has dignity, that is respectful of human and all life, that there is no such thing as a lower form of life. There is only life, and it should be, that equation should be celebrated. Make yourself that person, and this experience, the way the world is experiencing it, will go away. Teach our children, teach our grandchildren to be respectful, and then you won't have to have the painful experience of incongruencies of, I want to die, I'm committing suicide, I'm in self-sabotage, but I don't, but I want to move in another direction. Move everything in the same direction. It is not possible for you to help anyone else if you're on a suicide mission. If you're busy not valuing yourself and not wanting to live, you can't help anybody else live. This is very important. And this is where almost everyone I speak to has some level of sabotage, some level of doing themselves in. So now we're on a global level of everyone being in accord with running towards the edge of the cliff. It doesn't have to be that way. Does that make sense to you all?
It makes a lot of sense and definitely resonates.
Oh, absolutely. I always think of the plane analogy. If you're sitting on a plane, can you save somebody from oxygen starvation if you haven't put on your own oxygen mask?
It's absolutely, the law in this universe is self-preservation first. You preserve yourself, and then everyone else has an opportunity to be preserved. You don't preserve yourself, and there's no end to the pain and suffering that you may experience. It starts individually, and then you come together harmoniously, but it starts individually. And you have to call for respect and honor and dignity and your life, in government, in your marriage, in your partnerships, in your business. Greed is not the answer. This is an example of what greed brings us. And I think this is a great place to, reiterate, never give up, always call for the truth, and then stand in the truth of your own beingness. Look more deeply into life so that you may love it, so that you can be in accord with the formulas that make life, the equations that produce life, and then recognize you are that life and you are connected to all life. This may be difficult as we move forward, but this is a strategy and a solution. And that's what we'd like to definitely bring to your attention today for all of those listening. So the corruption that we see and all the things that are in the landscape are self-corrected first, and then we would be able to join together and demand honesty and uprightness. If we individually require it of ourselves and discipline ourselves to only do what supports truth and what supports life and what supports us, then we can come together and require it of our governments, of our schools, of our teachers. We can require that people not feed off our children, churches, and pedophiles, and people in government, and those who have money, those who want organ transplants. These are not conspiracy theories. There is a conspiracy. I think that's what I'd like to close with today. Do you have any closing comments?
Other than in Lakesh and Veritas, no.
I'm
Shall
right
we
there with
release
you.
the suffering and be the truth? And I hope that this is inspiring. I would like to quote one of our people from Florida. I don't know if she'd mind using her name, but I'm sure we can use the quote. Do you have it handy, Tavares, the quote from our friend in Florida today about mermaids?
Yes, I do have it
Would you
handy.
read that? I think it's valuable and true.
So this is someone who's a Floridian. Would you believe me if I said this hurricane season may or may not be the last before Florida goes back underwater? Either we need to figure out how to shapeshift into mermaids immediately, or perhaps evacuate to higher states of America and consciousness. Mic drop.
Yes, and that is truly the truth. The land that is below sea level does not belong to the land, it belongs to the sea, and the sea will have it back. So that's, for everybody living below sea level, you may be in for a roommate. And it is wise to recognize where you are and recognize where the land came from. If it was done by the civil engineers, if they have made the land livable, we should be thankful that we had that time on the land. But we are in the time where the water will take back what is theirs. And I will be speaking at the end of the month about water and that situation. But I applaud that comment on social media from one of our Florida friends. And I certainly agree that we should move to higher elevations, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Thank you.